Hey guys, and welcome to lecture number 8. Today is going to be a short lecture because I have a video that will go along with it. Now before we get started, I just want to make a note that in this course we will be watching some longer videos, and what is covered in those videos could be or will be on our quizzes and possibly even our final exam. So when I attach a video, the expectation is that you will watch all of the amount that I want you guys to watch, and that it might be part of our quizzes because it's content for this course. Some things have just been studied to the point where there's some really beautiful documentaries or like well shot dramatizations. So as much as I'm sure you guys love hearing me talk, I figure that maybe watching something might be a little bit more engaging every now and then. So keep that in mind. Today we're going to talk about early Christianity. And before we get started, I want to remind you guys of the Roman Empire. So this is the Roman Empire under the rule of Tiberius. I'm going to flip back to his slide to remind you guys. Tiberius was the emperor that comes after Augustus. So it goes Caesar, Augustus, then Tiberius. And if you remember, he wasn't a really great emperor. He was fit to be a leader. He didn't want to deal with that military uprising, so he sent Germanicus, and he kills Germanicus. So, and he had that whole thing with the island of Capri. So at the time of Tiberius, this was the Roman Empire. This area here is Rome, and then this is Greece, the Greek islands, over around here. We have modern-day France, modern-day Spain. This is the Nile River and the Egyptians, for when we talked way back in lecture 2. And here is Asia Minor, or modern-day Turkey. And this is the Middle East. Well, part of the Middle East. It's only a little bit. This area we're going to be talking about today, this is present-day Israel or Palestine. And hopefully you guys got to it in Global 10. Israel and Palestine, they're kind of the same place, but there's a global conflict going on. So they call it, it's depending on where you are in the world, it's called Israel or it's called Palestine. Anyways, back then in the time of Tiberius, it was called Judea. And this is where Jerusalem is located. So when it comes to Christianity revolves around a person named Jesus of Nazareth. And we know some things about Jesus, but we also know that he was born a poor Jewish person. So I'm sure you guys are thinking, what is year 0? Maybe you thought that year 0 was the year Jesus was born. Actually, Jesus was not born in the year 0. In fact, there is no such thing as year 0. Think of it as a negative to positive number. It went from -1 to +1. No 0. And the reason why I say we don't have a clear guess of when Jesus was born is because when you were poor, even some emperors, you didn't have a birthday back then. It wasn't something that was really celebrated. You just maybe you were born in a season, so people would be like, oh yes, that's John. He was born in the rainy season of, 5 years ago. So we don't know because 1, Jesus was born as a poor person. And 2, there's events that are mentioned in the Bible and in historical documents. For example, the Romans did a census in 8 BC. And there was also a census of Palestine in 7 BC. And on these two censi, I have no idea what the plural census is, there was no Jesus of Nazareth. But we also know that he was, maybe born around the time that we see this appearance of the star in the sky. And there's also mention of the death of Herod. And Herod was the king of Judea at the time. So we know that Jesus was alive around the time that this king of Judea died. So we also know that he was crucified around age 30, but we don't know if it was 31. We don't know if he was 38. We know he was in his 30s, though. So if you subtract when he was crucified, and if you take into these other dates into consideration, historians and theologians have guessed that he was born between 4 BCE and 30 CE. Now remember, 30 CE means Common Era, but the Christian way of saying it would be AD, and that means Anno Domini. Does not mean after death, it means in the year of our Lord in Latin. Okay. Enough of that. Too much math. This is a history class. Way too much math. So Judea was part of the Roman Empire, and at the time of Jesus, there was a couple different prevailing religions in the Roman Empire. There was paganism, there was polytheism, worshiping many gods. I know we didn't talk so much about the Greek gods or the Roman gods, but maybe you guys are familiar with like Zeus. Zeus was Greek, but Jupiter is Roman. Anyway, it's all Hellenistic culture, right? It's all Greco-Roman. Anyway, and then you also have Judaism. And Jesus was born as a Jew, and he was a Jewish preacher. And if you recall, in Judaism, Abraham made this deal with God, a covenant with God, that said, okay, Abraham and his family will do things for God, and as a result, God will do things for Abraham and his family. This is in Genesis of the Old Testament, and the Old Testament's also called the Torah, if you were Jewish. So, and I should also mention that Abraham is in the Quran as well. Okay, regardless, we'll get to that next class. So, at the time of the Roman Empire, there was a lot of things that were wrong, according to Jews. Okay, so the Ten Commandments comes from the Old Testament, which I just said is also called the Torah. So a Jewish person in the Roman Empire might see these emperors murdering each other and say, hey, now, thou shalt not kill. That was in the Ten Commandments in the Torah. And so there were a lot of people at the time that wanted to preach, to tell people to change, to get right with God, to do the right thing. Because God made this deal with people, and people need to hold up their end. That's what these people would talk about. And so Jesus was one of many people that was like this. A lot of people were doing this at the time, not just Jesus. There were also people who claimed to be the son of God or gods. For example, there are some coins from the days of Augustus that say that Augustus is the son of God. What was interesting, though, about Jesus is there was no poor Jewish people saying that they were the son of God. That was subversive. Subversive means going around what's right. To be subversive is to be different. To color your hair crazy colors to be subversive. To be gay is to be subversive. Subverting the norm. So I want to talk to you guys about the timeline of Jesus' life. Like I just talked about, we don't know exactly when he was born. We think it was 4 BCE. And from the time that he is a young man to the time of his death, he goes and preaches about the word of God, the word of Judaism. And what was interesting about Jesus is he wanted to talk about people. He was poor, so he wanted to talk about poor people feeling validated. He wanted to talk about, like the gentleness, the gentle side of religiosity. And so Jesus would go all around the area of Judea and kind of talk about these things. So we're going to look about some of the stuff that he said. And he comes back to Jerusalem at the time of Passover. Passover is a really important Jewish holiday. He goes to Jerusalem and he wants to go to the temple. And the story is that he sees people in the temple selling stuff. Now, if you remember, Rome was all about making money. Rome was about the economic enterprises. They wanted to make products, they wanted to sell things, the empire wanted to tax people. So Jesus gets to the temple and sees people selling animals and people changing money, which means like changing the currency, things like that. And Jesus was unhappy with this. Now, I want to read you guys a portion of the Bible to talk about this story. It says, let's see, this is about Jesus. And when he had made the scourged small cords, he drove them all out of the temple, and the sheep and the oxen, and poured out the changers' money and overthrew the tables. So he's like, get the hell out of here, and he flips the tables and he throws money and he, like hits the ox on the back of the butt so that they go and run off. And said unto them that sold doves, take these things hence, make not my Father's house a house of merchandise. The reason why I'm telling you this story is this is why Jesus was actually killed. Jesus was killed by the Romans for kind of like disturbing the peace. So he was interrupting trade. He was acting all important. And as you know, the Roman emperors are not about power being taken from them. And so they crucified Jesus. Now, crucifixion was just a way that people died back then. It wasn't anything special. It wasn't like the cross was because he was a Christian, because he wasn't at the time. He was still Jewish. When he died, Jesus was Jewish. Jesus is killed. And as far as the timeline for Christianity goes, because remember, this isn't a religious class, this is a history class, but for the rest of the course, Christianity and to some extent Judaism and Islam are going to be really important. So we have to talk about these stories whether we believe it or not. Just to be a historian, you have to know some of these things. So after Jesus dies in 64 AD, or CE, we have Emperor Nero. Do you guys remember Nero? Nero was the emperor that was like truly crazy. He was the one that killed his mom, and he would like rape women and boys, and he would kill people in the streets, and they think that he started the fire of Rome so that he could build a palace. But like we said, he didn't personally start it, but he had it started. Anyway, Nero, as we know, was a pretty sick guy. And he hated Christians. And so when he found Christians, or when Christians were like causing trouble, he would strap them to poles and put hay all around and light it on fire. And this is actually where we get the term Roman candle from. So this was a Roman candle. This was a a Christian person burning. And then here we can imagine this is Nero watching. Or maybe this is Nero watching. Well, no, this is definitely where Nero is. So anyways, once Nero starts doing that, then we enter into this 250 long time period called martyrdom for the Christians. Being a martyr is like dying for the righteous cause. Then you're being a martyr. So, does anyone know why this ends in the 300s? If only we talked about this guy, Constantine, and the Edict of Milan, where Christianity is tolerated. See, I told you we were going to go back in history a little bit. So anyways, this is where we're going to kind of leave Christianity for now, and we'll talk much more about it in the Dark Ages. But before we go, in this course, we've been talking about art, what it says about the society that made it. So I want to show you guys parts of the Sermon on the Mount. So the Sermon on the Mount was, apparently Jesus was talking to his followers, and he was saying these things that we should believe. So this is what Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount. Ye have heard it, that it was said of them of old time, Thou shalt not kill. And whoever shall kill shall be in danger of judgment. But I say unto you, that whoever is angry with his brother without cause shall be in danger of judgment. Jesus also says, Ye have heard that it hath been said, An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you, that ye resist not evil, but whoever so shall smite or strike thine on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also. And the last thing we're going to go over here says, Ye have heard that it hath been said, Thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thine enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemies. Bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. Okay? So what does the Sermon on the Mount say about early Christians? If we were in class, we'd talk about it, but I guess I'll just tell you how I feel. First is the I'm going to call the divorce from Judaism. So here in this first passage and this one, the third one, Jesus is saying things from Judaism and purposely contradicting them. So Jesus isn't saying, yeah, do exactly what God and Abraham said. Jesus is saying, no, you should do what I'm saying instead. So this is, again, here's that word subversive. Jesus is subverting Judaism. And this is why Jesus ends up having his own religion, is because Jesus wasn't just a Jewish preacher saying much of the same. Jesus was saying different things. And then we also have this idea of martyrdom. But regardless, this also says to me that early Christians, let's see, this aspect of an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, this dates way back to the Code of Hammurabi in Babylonian. Oh my god, in Babylon, jeez Louise. But Jesus is saying, no, question the things that you've learned about historically. If someone is mean to you and slaps you in the face, turn the other side of your face and let them slap you again. And the last thing that, to me, the Sermon of the Mount says about early Christians is the idea of being very anti-Roman. Does this sound Roman to you, to love your enemy? Do you think that Nero or Little Boots Caligula would love his enemy? I don't even think that Augustus would love his enemy, considering he had the bromance with Antony, and he ends up Antony and Cleopatra end up killing themselves because he goes to war with them. So, yeah, another reason why Christianity was so subversive is because it was anti-Roman. And this is why Constantine is so important, because Constantine was like, hey, I'm a Roman emperor, but I'm also Christian. And everyone's like, what do you mean? To be Christian is in itself to not be Roman. But he was like, I know. This is just more important to me now. So these things all tie into what we're going to be learning in the future. Our next couple units focus really heavily on Christianity because this is a Western Civ class, and because out of the Dark Ages, some of the only parts of civilization that survive are places where Christian monks live. So religion becomes even more important because of the people that are telling us the history. I hope that makes some sense to you guys. So we're going to end here for today, and I want you to watch that video, and I think this is our last lecture for the week, so have a great weekend too.